what's the next recipe you're making for us?
The next recipe is a Danish recipe. It's for a butter cake. It's a bit of a strange cake recipe. It's made with a dough hook, and it creates definitely a soft dough rather than a batter, which you rest briefly before you bake it. Excuse me, the end result is a fantastic, moist, decadent, simple cake.
Okay, because the butter, sugar and flour is all the same
one to
amount.
one, yeah.
Yeah, so that seems...
It's very simple, but it's really delicious.
So that's the kind of thing they would say in the States and say it's a cuppa.
Cuppa, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's similar to a pound cake recipe,
Right.
which typically would have been a pound of butter, a pound of sugar, a pound of flour. I've added the lemons because I find it rich otherwise, a bit too rich. But normally it's cut into very small triangles or 1-inch squares to serve.
Oh, I see. So you would eat it as a small
a
anyway.
little, you know, what's the word?
A mousse-bouche.
That's it. A petit four, that's what I was looking for.
Okay, so what are you starting with?
So to start off with, I am going to just get my bowl with butter and sugar. So I'm using golden caster sugar because I like the colour that it gives as well.
Okay, not because it makes any particular difference to the flavour?
No,
okay.
not at all.
So we're starting, you're going to use mixer again, so we've got a mixing bowl on scales.
And I'm actually going to use a dough hook again, which is unusual for cake. You would normally only really use this for bread doughs. But for cakes, for this cake in particular, the dough hook really helps to bring it together without overworking it. The good thing about this recipe is it's 250 grams for this size of butter, sugar and flour, so you don't have to weigh your butter because that is one block of butter.
So in the UK, our butter comes in blocks of 250 grams. So that's easy then, it's just straight in.
Yeah.
Do you break it up a bit?
I am going to because it's still quite fridge cold, so
you're going to just chop it up a bit.
Don't want it to stress the mixer. I'm just going to...
That's a new term I haven't heard. Stress
the mixer.
Makes sense though, because if it's too heavy for it does
stress.
go.
Yeah,
doesn't
exactly.
That's what I call my process when I'm making sourdough. But I'm the mixer.
You're stressing the mixer. Okay. And I'm going to add the same amount of sugar.
So we've got the butter and the sugar going in. Are you going to cream them together? Or
Yes.
are you going to add the flour?
I'm going to cream them together, but not as you would have known it with a paddle attachment to the mixer. I'm creaming it together as much as you can with a dough hook.
Okay. This is something that I remember learning from school about creaming together the butter and sugar.
Normally, if you have a paddle attachment and you're making a Victoria sponge, you cream them really, really well together to incorporate as much air as you can at that point.
Yeah.
But this cake doesn't really require too much air, actually, so we're going to cream it as is. Although I am going to add some vanilla now, so let me just grab it.
Okay. And you're using a vanilla paste rather than an essence?
Yes, it's personal preference, but I prefer working with a vanilla paste. I like the look where you get the seeds in there as well. And it's quite handy to use really because it doesn't dry up, it doesn't go off. It's the real deal, and it smells and tastes lovely. And you get the nice speckled seeds in there too. So I'm going to pop that on to mix with the dough hook.
And how long does that need to mix initially? Or
It needs to go, I'll watch it to see, but it realistically needs to go for about 3 minutes, maybe even 4. So with this recipe, because you're using a dough hook, quite often at the start, especially if your butter's very cold, you'll need to just scrape the bowl down with a bench scraper just to make sure that the dough hook is picking up all of that butter and sugar. Otherwise you might find that it's going for a long time and not actually doing anything.
It just moves it up the sides, doesn't it?
Yeah, it can do, yeah. This is pretty much ready for the next step. So we've been using the dough hook just to really blend the butter and sugar.
Oh, wow.
It's just a bit of a paste really. It doesn't whip it up at all.
It's not creamed like you would have done. No, it is just a granular paste.
Yeah, you really, and that's why this is actually a great recipe to do by hand. The only thing is if you're doing it by hand, mix it slowly. Don't beat it, because you'll beat the air into it, and that's what you want to avoid.
Okay.
So the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to add in the egg and the lemon zest, and following on from that, we're going to do the flour.
Next step, you want to add eggs.
Yes.
So, or egg.
Yeah.
So my question that I see discussed a lot: do you think size matters when it comes to eggs?
When it comes to eggs, I'm going to say not really.
Okay.
I think that the parameters for a good size egg is quite wide.
Yeah.
What I would say is, unless you're using liquid egg, if you're using liquid egg that you can buy in a carton, definitely weigh that. If you look at your egg and go, my God, that's a small egg, or man, that is the biggest egg I've ever seen, in that case it might be worth weighing.
Yeah.
But otherwise, unless you're looking at it and thinking, no, that is huge or tiny, I don't think it's necessary. Mine here look actually very small.
Yeah,
That's a really small egg in particular, so I'm actually going to weigh it, but contrary to that, I wouldn't really recommend it, because I think it's often a bit of a waste of time.
See, when I was writing my first book, or when I was starting to write books, and it became very clear that I needed to be very specific in recipes, and I didn't know quite how far to go with some of the detail.
Yeah.
So I wasn't too sure about whether to write the size of eggs, as a standard egg or a large egg. My best friend is in the States, so I've got eggs in the UK, and I'm weighing them, separating them. I said, right, can you buy me a standard egg in the States and tell me what that one weighs?
Yeah.
So that you could do a comparison, because I knew that people would ask.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to actually just allay people's fears, I did actually get to go down the route of weighing eggs and yolks and whites and stuff like that.
Completely. So that small one that I just cracked, that only weighed 45 grams, where a regular egg is about 70. At the moment, because of the situation in the UK with the avian flu, it's very hard to get good size eggs right now. So if you are looking at your egg and going, that looks really small or that looks huge, definitely give it away. But there is a good parameter that you've got in terms of eggs with baking, especially in a recipe like this. I might leave out, so the 2 eggs combined weigh 95 grams. I might leave out a tiny bit, but I would in general feel pretty good about putting that whole 95 grams into my recipe, because a regular egg is 70 there or thereabouts. So you're talking about a small amount bigger.
And 25 grams of an egg, when you've got a dough, that actually, it's quite a heavy dough, it's quite a rich dough with everything that's in it. That extra 20 grams of egg is not actually going to make much difference.
It's not going to make a difference at all.
And I think it is something that people need to not stress too much about.
Definitely, yeah.
Especially if you've got an enriched dough or an enriched loaf that you're putting an egg into. An extra 10, 20, 25 grams is not going to make any difference at the end of the day. Well, I'm so glad you agree with me.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just going to chuck all of that in there, into the butter and sugar paste. And then I'm also adding my lemon zest. I've just done pretty much 2 lemons. I'll just take the last little bit off of this one.
Okay, so we've got the zest of 2 lemons.
Yes, if you want it more lemony or less lemony, this is pretty much open for interpretation. You're free to add more or less as you like. I've seen some people add almond extract to this, that's quite nice. It's really personal preference, whatever you like with your recipe.
So you're adding all of the zest of 2 lemons.
Yeah, that's right.
And again, 2 kind of standard size lemons.
Yeah. You've
Unless
got massive lemons, use 1.
If you get the huge ones from Costco, probably just 1.
Tiny lemons, but if you really like lemon, use 3. I don't mind.
Just mix it through gently.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, you're going to want to eventually scrape your bowl down and do that a couple of times. This is the trouble with a dough hook, is it does take a little while for it to really combine together. But you just keep persevering with it. 5 minutes, you should be there or thereabouts.
Okay.
So it's been mixing for a little while now on the dough hook. Don't be scared at this point. It does look curdled. It looks pretty gross. It's coming together. You just have to add the flour, and then you'll get to a better place.
I always think that when you make these kind of things, it just kind of looks like curdles.
You just got to trust the process.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So now I'm just adding in a pinch of salt.
Any kind of salt, just table salt?
Any salt. I've used unsalted butter, so you just need to season it the same as you would for savoury food.
Okay.
And then I'm just going to add in my flour. So for this I'm just using classic plain flour.
So which one are you choosing? Just the straight
It's
plain
just
flour?
the standard Cotswold flour, plain flour. You could use the organic for this if you'd like, but you don't want anything with too much protein. You don't want any bread flour really.
Okay, so plain flour is going to be 10 to 11 grams of protein.
That's it, yeah. And again, it's 250 grams, so it's a really simple recipe because it's the same amount of everything plus 1 egg, plus some vanilla and some salt.
So in the States, would you use all-purpose flour?
Yeah, probably.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be the level. Or and sometimes I don't know what you think. Things like this, I often use white spelt flour instead of plain flour.
Yeah, that's a nice way to incorporate something new. So the trick is at this point not to overmix it. You want to add in your flour, let it go just until it's all incorporated, because then we're actually going to give it a very brief knead on the
Kneading
side.
a cake
Kneading
dough.
a cake dough, yeah.
So it is something that is completely different.
Yes, and that's where if you did have a slightly larger egg, or depending on what brand of butter you've used, you might need a sprinkle of extra flour, but it's
Yeah.
nothing to be concerned about. Just add it in until you've got something pliable, like we'll see in a minute. So it's just about finished now. The dough cook has been mixing it. There's still a little bit left on the edges, but we'll bring that in with our dough scraper. So you can see it's a real thick, buttery dough.
Yeah,
it's
it's really
halfway
quite
between, I would say, a cake mix and a soft bread dough.
It smells amazing with the
it's
lemon.
Lemon and butter, sugar, what more could you want? So what we're going to do is I'm going to tip it out onto the bench, sprinkle with flour, and we're just going to not knead it, we're just going to bring it together.
Okay.
If I get rid of this stuff quickly.
So if I show our cameras, I mean it's really heavy. Now, being the type that I am, that I don't particularly enjoy getting my hands dirty, I would look at that and go, oh. Because I do everything in a bowl.
Yes. It's almost like if you just continued to mix a shortbread dough, I suppose, because of the amount of butter that's in it as well. So I've got that on there, and I'm just going to sprinkle the bench with some flour. I'm just going to sprinkle the top with a little bit more as well.
Okay,
And then
so this is the flour that we've used in this one.
it's really, really, really soft, really pliable, so you don't want to be handling it too much, but we're literally just bringing it together. Again, another really great use for a bench
watching you do
scraper.
this with your bench scraper, this is a lady that knows what she is doing. Sorry, I stole your bag.
Stole my flour. So
Can you
just need a bit more.
say the name of that flour, because what you did works well for video but not for audio.
I do apologise. So once again, what we've done is use Matthews Cotswold plain flour in the green bag with protein content of 10 grams. I
Yeah,
think.
there we go. So I've just switched to my metal scraper just because it's a little bit better at picking up the underneath of the dough. And I'm just going to make sure I don't leave any behind here.
So this is okay to be adding extra flour to the surface
Absolutely.
to do this. We're not going to be putting the dough out of any
Yep.
kind of consistency by adding extra flour to the surface.
The only thing you want to be careful of is this dough will stick to your hands. This
Yes.
is one that will stick. So you don't want to add so much flour that it's now not sticking, because that would turn it into a shortbread.
Right.
If it does do that, you've got a very nice shortbread.
Nice
Put it in a
lemony
tin
shortbread.
and
Yes.
bake it off. But
Okay.
if it doesn't, that's what you're aiming for, is a really, really soft dough, almost like a paste.
So-
it will stick, but we're keeping
So
it
what
dry.
Sophie's just done is put her fingertips into the dough and it's still showing the indents. So that's good for this dough.
Absolutely,
Is
yeah.
to hold the indent. Okay.
So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap it up in some cling film.
So this needs to prove for a little?
It just wants
Just
to
grow a
rest.
bit?
It just wants to
Okay.
rest. It won't grow at all. Because
And are you resting it on the counter?
just on the counter, yeah. You
Okay,
can
'cause
put
if
it
you-
in the fridge if you're. You can leave. You know, you can rest this for a couple of hours if you'd like. It won't change it at all, but it just wants to sit for a minute. That's
But if
how
you
you
put
get
it
those
in the
results.
fridge, wouldn't the butter firm
butter
up and
will
make it
firm
too
up.
hard?
So if you're going to put it in the fridge, you want to bring it out and leave it at room temperature until it's as soft as when you made it.
Fine.
Great. So the dough's rested a little bit, and I've got my cake tin ready. I've just greased it with some cake greasing spray, but you can use use a brush with some melted butter or vegetable oil, something just to kind of slick it up a little bit.
I'm not very good at this because I don't make cakes very often. But so if I do grease a tin,
Yeah,
I get a bit of kitchen roll and just
Yeah.
wipe it through my butter and wipe that round.
Yeah,
Does that do the
that
job?
will work as well.
Okay.
If your tin is particularly sticky, you can put some greaseproof paper down, but I know that this one doesn't stick, so
You tend to know your own baking
you do,
implements,
yeah.
don't
If you don't know it, err on the side of caution. So
Okay.
I'm just tipping it out of its little cling film wrapper.
So do you have any idea what diameter this is? It looks about 18
That's an
centimetres.
8-inch,
Okay.
sorry, yes, that's an 8-inch tin.
Okay. About 20.
I do know that because I only just bought that tin to make my wedding cake.
You made your own wedding
I
cake?
did, I made my wedding cake, yes.
Oh, cool.
So just again, use a scraper, or if you don't have a scraper, you could just give your hands a quick oil before you do this. It's just because the dough is quite sticky. So pop it into the tin like that,
So we're just scraping the dough off the counter,
straight into the
plopping
tin.
it straight into the tin.
And then again, you can use a damp hand, or if you've got, you could even reuse the same bit of cling film that we used before. You just want to press it in. This cake, because it's very stiff dough, it's not self-leveling like a lot of cake mixes are, meaning it won't level itself out in the oven once the butter starts to melt.
So whatever shape you press it to, it's going to
That's
hold?
what it will hold, pretty much, yeah.
So we're baking this as a single round piece.
Yes.
Do you, once it's out, you then cut it into pieces
I
to
do,
serve
yeah.
it?
Yes.
Do you cut it immediately or when it's cool?
You've got to wait for it to cool down a little bit,
Okay.
for about 40 minutes, just because there's such a high volume of butter in there. If you try and cut it immediately, it would probably just crumb away,
Okay.
and you won't end up with a very nice looking product.
So all that we're doing at the moment, Sophie's doing, is just gently pressing this down so that you're creating a flat surface.
You
on
can
the top.
even use your
Scraper.
scraper just to really
Just to
smooth it out.
smooth the top off.
But again, it doesn't matter if it's not perfect. It's a very rustic recipe. It's a rustic cake, very traditional in Denmark. So just do as you feel you want to. Some people actually, as well, traditionally would, now that we're at this point where you've got a nice smooth top, they would take a fork and create some patterns on the
yes.
top, almost
Okay.
like you would for a Florentine,
Yeah.
in the chocolate. But I prefer to leave it as is because you get a nice flaky top then. So the next step before we bake it, you want to liberally dust the top with a bit more sugar. This isn't a healthy recipe by any stretch of the imagination, but just your regular caster sugar that you used in the recipe. Just give the top a really nice dusting.
So I take it that's going to create a crust. Is it going to
crea-
caramelise
It
as well?
will. Sometimes it does go golden brown, but the main point of it creates this really nice flaky texture on the top. So that's what you're looking for, a really nice crumbly flaky top, and it does go brown and give a good flavour, especially because I've used golden caster sugar. You get already that slightly caramelly.
If you're watching this at all, what you'll be able to see is this lovely flat dough that's been pushed into our pan, and we've got some sugar sprinkled over the top, ready for it to bake.
Yep. So now this is ready to go into the oven. You need your oven at 170 degrees for this, and it's a fairly long bake.
So it's
between
quite low.
40 and 50 minutes for this one. Because of the high proportion of butter, you want to go low and slow with it, because otherwise you'll end up with quite a hard, almost like more of a biscuit.
Is it going to rise at all?
No,
So it's almost a bit shortcakey.
it's like a shortcake, yeah, but it's just that little bit more cakey than shortbread.
That'd be interesting.
And because we use deck ovens here, which are professional baking ovens, they have a stone bottom. So just to avoid the cake burning on the bottom, I'm going to flip over a baking tray and put my cake on the top of that, just to create a barrier between the stone and the cake.
Okay, brilliant. Into the oven we're going to go. This is a huge oven. And the cake is in. Watch this space. Our cake is ready.
Yep, it's cooled down a lot, so I think we can safely turn it out now.
Can I just?
Yeah.
Can anybody hear that? Can you hear that? That is the lovely crunchy crust that's got on the top.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I'm just gonna, in one swift movement, tip it, give it a bit of a jiggle.
You
see
might
if
need
it
to
release.
loosen around the edges with the
Yeah.
knife if you need it
You
to
might
come
need
out.
to, especially because we've let it sit for a little while now, so we'll just give it an encouragement. Here we go.
There we go.
There we go. It's
Out
quite
it
a
comes.
robust cake, so don't be scared to throw it about a little bit.
Oh no.
So you can see it's very dense. It's not like a sponge cake at all. It's
And
really,
it is, like you said, it would be quite questionable to call it a cake.
Yeah.
It's almost a biscuit.
it's really a very rich petit four that in Denmark would be served with coffee in the afternoon. It's very sweet, very rich, and very Moorish. So
I would say you probably don't need much.
you don't. And how it's normally served, either it's cut into tiny triangles or 1-inch cubes. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it into squares. But I'm actually, because we've got the crackle on the top, I'm actually going to use a serrated knife just so I don't disturb that crackle.
Well, yeah, because you want to keep the crackle, don't you?
You do, yeah. And it really has a nice lemony smell.
It does. Quite nice. It does. Wow, this is when you're going to have someone in your kitchen just wanting to pick off the little bits
Yeah,
that come off on the edges.
Exactly. So there will be some little parts that go spare.
Oh look, there's a little bit that fell off. Oh look. Oh.
And it keeps really well, this cake, because of the high proportion of fat. It lasts really, really amazingly in an airtight tin. So you know you can make it well in advance, really, if you want to serve it
Looks
for a tea or
amazing.
something.
And it looks quite nicely moist inside.
It is, yeah. It's. I'm gonna give it a taste.
I'm seeing if your handiwork, Sophie.
I think it's pretty good.
Is your mouth watering yet, David? Yeah?
With a
Wow.
cup of tea or a coffee, it's you know, spot
Wait,
on, really.
what's this hand coming in our direction? What do you think?
A really nice, simple buttery cake.
That is David miming to die for.
But yeah, it's my lemon Danish butter cake.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And thank you for having us in your
No,
kitchen.
thank you for coming.
Please, everybody, you will be able to find this recipe on the website. Just look for the episode. If you want to see all of this actually in person, there's videos of all of it. Please remember we are recording this for a podcast, so the videos, we're not necessarily looking at the screens too much because we're focusing on talking to each other. As you can hear, I'm losing my voice. It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. No,
You
it's
are
been
a
lovely.
baking superstar, so thank you for having us in your kitchen.
Thank you, no worries.